If this video reached you today, it's no coincidence. There's a reason this message has crossed your path right now. The wound you carry, that silent pain that seems never to heal, could be the very portal through which light will enter. Nothing happens by accident. When you least expect it, life finds mysterious ways to speak to you, and perhaps this is your moment to listen. Have you ever wondered why the more you beg for love, the emptier you feel inside? It's almost as if each plea for affection is a drop that evaporates before even touching your deepest thirst. Osho said that when we seek outside ourselves for what we lack within, we become slaves to the approval of others. And that's what happens when you beg. You surrender your energy, your dignity, your very essence, believing that the other holds the key to your completeness. But stop for a moment and realize, how many times have you believed that true love would come from the very person who made you wait, beg, and humble yourself? How many times have you mistaken fleeting attention for care, crumbs of presence for love? This is the cycle that imprisons. With each attempt to conquer what should already be natural, you lose yourself further. Begging for love is like trying to light a flame by blowing on it. The fire doesn't grow, it dies out. Osho invites us to look at this emptiness not as a curse, but as an opportunity. The wound is where the light enters, because it is there that you open yourself. It is there that you stop feigning strength and admit, I no longer want to live begging for love. I want to be love. It is in that moment that transformation begins, but before this shift can happen, it takes courage to face the truth. As long as you beg, you will be a prisoner of need. And make no mistake, this neediness isn't just about romantic relationships. It shows up in friendships where you always give more than you receive. At work, when you exhaust yourself trying to prove you're enough. In your family, when you sacrifice yourself to keep the peace. The pattern is always the same. You put yourself second and beg for recognition, attention, validation. And each time you do this, the wound deepens. But the secret lies precisely there. This wound, which seems like a sign of weakness, is your greatest chance to awaken. Because every time it throbs, it's reminding you that you don't need to beg. You need to choose. Choose your peace, choose your silence, choose your presence. Osho reminds us that true love isn't born from desperate pleading, but from the state of witness, when you are so full of yourself, so present in your own essence, that love overflows effortlessly. Think about it. How many times has your silence been more disturbing than any words? How many times when you stopped reacting, have you seen people reveal their true selves? This happens because when you stop begging, you break the game. The other person no longer has control. You're no longer an emergency button that can be pressed at any time. You become someone rare, whole, impossible to manipulate. And that's when everything changes. It's not about becoming cold or indifferent. It's about finally seeing yourself as a source of light, not a beggar for emotional scraps. The wound opens the space for light, but only if you have the courage not to fill it with the same cycle of begging. It's in the silence, in the space you create, that healing begins. Stay with me for the next few minutes because we're going to dive even deeper. I'll show you why begging was never love, why hurt is actually a gift in disguise, and how your life begins to transform the very moment you choose to stop asking for what only blossoms when it grows from within. And before we go any further in this reflection, I want to invite you to actively participate in this process. This video isn't just a message for you to listen to and pass on. It's a call to truly look at yourself. So tell me in the comments, how many times have you felt like you were putting yourself down, begging for love, attention, or recognition? Write about your experience, even if it's just a few words, because when you share, you not only release what was trapped inside you, but you also help others who will identify with your story. It's crucial that you engage with this content. The more you understand, the more you'll begin to realize that transformation isn't a distant promise. It begins now, the moment you decide to stop living on emotional crumbs. So, if this message has resonated with you so far, please leave a like, because that way YouTube understands the importance of this content and brings this light to even more people who also need to hear it today. And if you're not subscribed yet, take advantage and subscribe to the channel. It's quick, it's free, and it will ensure you don't miss the next chapters of this journey. We're just getting started, and each video is like a piece of this soul puzzle, so activate the bell, because I want to walk with you step by step until the moment when begging for love stops being part of your life and you begin to live the fullness of being whole. You constantly give yourself, hoping to be recognized, but in the end, you feel used, invisible, and exhausted. This is the pain that almost no one admits out loud, but which they carry silently like a constant weight on their chest. The feeling of giving yourself completely to someone, believing that love would come in return, only to discover that, in the end, only scraps remain. It's like being always available to everyone but never a priority for anyone. You're the one there when everyone needs you. The friend who solves the problem, the partner who supports you, the family member who endures, and yet, when you're the one in need, the silence echoes. Osho said that the moment we beg for love is the moment we cease to be a living presence and become merely an object, a piece of furniture for others to use when it suits them. Imagine the scene. You're like people's emotional emergency button. They press it, soothe their pain, dump their own dramas on you, and then quickly return you to the shelf, as if you were disposable. There's no true gratitude, just a cycle of constant use. You give of yourself believing that, at some point, your effort will be recognized. But what comes back is indifference when it's no longer a demand. This pattern repeats itself so often that you begin to believe the problem is you. It's at this point that tiredness turns to exhaustion and your heart begins to close, not out of coldness but out of survival. And perhaps you've already noticed, this pain isn't limited to romantic relationships. It invades your friendships, where you always become the one listening but never the one being heard. It shows up at work, when you give more than you receive, when you work hard to show your worth and receive only demands in return. It even infiltrates your family, where you sacrifice yourself in the name of harmony, but no one notices the deep wounds hidden within you. This dynamic has a cruel name: self-abandonment. And every time you beg for love, you reaffirm this abandonment, reinforcing the unconscious idea that you need to devalue yourself to deserve affection. Osho teaches us that when you live to please, you lose your witnessing, cease to be a conscious presence, and become an object. This means that by begging, you give away your power, placing yourself in a position of inferiority, as if you were unworthy of being loved simply by existing. And it is at this point that the wound opens even wider, because with each gesture of begging, what you receive in return is confirmation of your neediness. It's like trying to fill a leaky cup. The more you pour, the emptier it becomes. The worst part is that often you don't even realize how deeply ingrained this dynamic is. It's automatic. You respond to messages late at night even when you're exhausted. You justify your unavailability. You rush to put out emotional fires that aren't even yours. And all of this stems from a dangerous illusion that if you do enough, someone will finally love you the way you deserve. But the truth is, this love never comes from begging. The love that comes from outside when you deny yourself is merely a reflection of your lack of self-love. Osho said that true awakening begins when you understand that you don't need to beg to receive what is already your nature. Love isn't something you beg for, it's something you manifest. But as long as you continue to believe you need to beg, you'll remain trapped in this cycle of pain, invisibility, and exhaustion. This is the wound that bleeds within you every day, and perhaps you've become so accustomed to it that you think it's normal, but it isn't. This pain is the call to stop nullifying yourself, to stop believing that being used is the same as being loved. And I want you to reflect on this now. How many times have you felt exactly like that emergency button? How many times have you realized your life was revolving around the needs of others, while your essence was lost in the process? This is the time to name the pain, to acknowledge its existence, because only then can transformation begin. Now write a single sentence in the comments: I am not an object. This simple sentence is an act of resistance against the pattern of begging. It's the first step toward reclaiming your presence, toward reminding yourself that you are not here to be used, but to be seen, felt, and respected. Protecting your energy isn't selfishness, it's spiritual intelligence. This phrase needs to resonate within you until it becomes almost a daily mantra, because it's what will free you from the guilt that so often traps you in the role of begging for love. You've been conditioned to believe that saying no is rejection, that setting boundaries is hurting others, that caring for yourself before caring for others is an act of selfishness. But Osho reminds us that nothing is more illusory than this belief. When you abandon yourself in the name of pleasing, when you give yourself over to exhaustion expecting recognition, what you're doing isn't love. It's attachment disguised as virtue. And all attachment stems from a lack of awareness. You need to understand that protecting your energy is in fact the greatest gesture of love you can offer the world. Because a human being who preserves themselves, who cares for their inner field, who knows the weight and value of their silence, is a whole human being, capable of offering true presence. Osho said, "Silence is not absence, it is total presence." This quote carries a powerful key. You often think that by distancing yourself from those who drain you, by not responding immediately, by not begging to be seen, you are disappearing. But no, it is precisely in that moment that you truly appear. Conscious silence is not emptiness, it is plenitude. Think about how many times you've said yes when you meant no, how many times you forced a smile while inside you were falling apart, how many times you gave in for fear of losing the little attention you received. And in all these situations, a corrosive guilt accompanied the idea of putting yourself first. It's this guilt that needs to be dissolved, because it fuels the cycle of begging. When you feel guilty about protecting yourself, you end up giving in again, and once again your energy is drained. But when you understand that your limit is a form of spiritual intelligence, you free yourself from the burden of justifying your own survival. And it's curious how when you finally protect yourself, the world reacts. Some people will say you've changed, that you've become cold, that you're not the same anymore. And in a way, it's true. You really are no longer the same. You've stopped being an object and started being a presence. But for those who are used to sucking, this presence is uncomfortable. Your silence, which for you is a space of healing, becomes a mirror for others. They begin to see themselves. They begin to feel the discomfort they once hid, using you as an escape valve. It's at this point that the transformation happens, not only in you, but also in the way others relate to your new stance. Osho said that compassion without awareness becomes attachment, and awareness without compassion becomes hardness. The path is always balance. Therefore, protecting your energy doesn't mean building impenetrable walls. It doesn't mean turning to stone. It means choosing clearly where you place your time, your attention, your presence. It means understanding that saying no to manipulation, exploitation, and emotional dependence is saying yes to your inner truth. That's why protecting your energy is a deeper act of love than giving yourself without measure. Notice how this understanding begins to dissolve guilt. If you're not responsible for the pain another person must endure, if you're not forced to carry burdens that aren't yours, then every limit you set stops being a rejection and becomes a conscious choice. You don't withdraw, you remain whole. And when you're whole, you can offer something that begging never will: respect. Respect that begins within you and, as a reflex, teaches others to see their worth. You might be afraid that by changing this attitude, people will drift away. And it's true, some will. But watch carefully. Those who walk away when you stop begging were never really there for you, only for the benefit of having someone always available. Those who stay, stay for who you are, not for what you give without limits. This is where the wound begins to transform into light, because by protecting yourself, you make room only for relationships that respect your essence. Now I want you to do a simple exercise. Notice if, at any point in your life, you've ever felt guilty simply for resting, for not responding immediately, for saying a sincere no. This guilt is proof that you still believe you need to beg for acceptance. And it's precisely this prison that we begin to break when we choose the spiritual intelligence of preserving our energy. Now write in the comments just one sentence: "My silence is presence." Because by declaring this, you take on the power of what Osho taught. You transform the silence that was previously seen as absence into a gesture of totality. When you begin to see the wound not as a punishment, but as a calling, something within you changes. From that point on, a paradigm shift arises, the moment you understand that you no longer need to beg for love, and that's exactly when everything changes. Until now, you've lived believing that insisting, overgiving, and begging were signs of dedication, but now you realize they were just chains disguised as care. Begging doesn't strengthen any bond. On the contrary, begging creates dependence. Every time you beg, you reinforce the other person's idea of power over you, as if they were a source of air that keeps your heart breathing. This emotional dependence isn't love, it's a prison, and often you only realize it when you're already suffocating. It's at this point that the second truth reveals itself. Guilt maintains the cycle. Every time you think about walking away, about saying no, about protecting your own energy, guilt appears like a voice inside your head, whispering that you're selfish, ungrateful, or cold. This guilt wasn't born within you. It was planted over the years by a society that teaches that giving without limits is a virtue, while protecting yourself is a flaw. And this guilt is what keeps you coming back, even when you know you're hurting yourself. With every step toward your freedom, it pulls you back into emotional slavery. But here's the key. Guilt isn't proof of love. It's just the trap that keeps you in the same position. And then we come to the most liberating point. Conscious silence opens space for respect. It's not the silence of escape, resentment, or indifference, but the silence of presence. Osho said that the conditioned mind loves patterns, predictable repetitions, because that's what keeps the game going. The people around you know exactly what to expect. You'll justify yourself, you'll chase after them, you'll explain yourself. And that's why the game never changes. It's not that others have some magical control over you. It's not that they're stronger or more dominant. It's simply that you always react the same way. But when you choose conscious silence, when you decide to break the pattern, the game falls apart. Think of it as a board where you always occupy the same place. The pieces move, but you continue to react the same way, and so the outcome never changes. The day you decide to stop playing, the board loses its meaning. Those who previously fed off your predictability begin to lose their way because they no longer find the same response. This silence isn't passivity, it's power. It's the space where you make it clear, without words, that you're no longer willing to beg. And curiously, it's in this space that respect is born. Respect arises because the other person realizes you are no longer available to be used as an emotional tool. You don't become inaccessible, you become aware. The difference is enormous. Osho reminded us that awareness is not hardness, it is clarity. And it is this clarity that shows the world that you are not an infinite resource, but a human being with limits, dignity, and your own light. When you occupy this place, relationships begin to reconfigure themselves. Some people distance themselves because they no longer find their former easy refuge in you. Others, however, begin to look at you with new eyes, realizing that behind your silence lies an unshakable strength. This paradigm shift is uncomfortable at first because you feel like you're missing something. The absence of begging feels empty, but it's precisely this emptiness that makes room for a new presence. It's as if the universe needed this silence to plant something different within you. And the longer you sustain this new posture, the more you begin to feel the lightness of not depending on others' reactions. You no longer need crumbs because you learn to feed on your own completeness. And here's a key point. When you stop begging, you not only change your own life, but you alter the dynamics of all your relationships. People who previously had unrestricted access to your energy begin to realize they can no longer count on your predictability. And some will try to push, will test your limits, will use words to provoke the old guilt. But if you maintain conscious silence, their every attempt becomes futile, because there's no longer a game to be played. Now, I want you to think about a recent situation in which you noticed this pattern in action. Maybe someone made you feel like you needed to chase after them, apologize, justify something you hadn't done. Maybe it was a relationship, a friendship, or even a work environment. Remember how you reacted. And now imagine what it would have been like if, instead of begging, you had simply taken a deep breath, maintained silence, and maintained your presence. This is the exercise I want to propose to you. Visualize that moment and realize what it would be like to break the pattern. And to seal this reflection, I want you to write a single sentence in the comments. I break the game. By writing this, you declare to yourself that you will no longer be held hostage by predictability, that you will no longer give in to dependence or guilt, and that you choose the power of conscious silence as the path to respect. Now that you've begun to understand how conscious silence can break the cycle of begging, it's time to turn this understanding into real practice. Knowledge only becomes liberating when it's put into action, when it stops being just an idea and becomes experience. That's why I want to propose a simple yet extremely powerful protocol that can change the way you relate to yourself and the world. It's not a distant theory. It's an exercise you can start implementing today, immediately, without needing anything more than willingness and courage. For 24 hours, just one day you will commit to not seeking validation from anyone. This means not seeking approval with every gesture, not begging for attention with every response, not trying to justify yourself to be accepted. Every time you feel the urge to explain too much, to send that message hoping for a response, to offer more than necessary, stop. Take a deep breath and say to yourself, I choose my peace. This phrase is not just a set of words, it is an internal reprogramming. It's as if you are reminding your mind and heart that you don't need to beg for anything, because you already have everything essential within you. You may feel uncomfortable in the first few hours because the addiction to seeking validation is strong. You may feel empty, anxious, as if you're missing something important, but it's in this space of discomfort that the exercise begins to reveal its true power. Because by resisting the temptation to ask for love, you discover that you don't need it as much as you thought. You begin to realize that peace comes not from the other person's response, but from your choice not to lose yourself in emotional begging. Osho taught that true transformation happens in the silence of observation. Therefore, I want to give you a second practice, which complements the 24-hour challenge. Whenever you receive a message, a demand, or even an invitation that awakens in you the urge to justify or explain yourself beyond what is necessary, don't respond immediately. Before acting, sit in silence for 2 minutes. Simply observe what happens within you. Notice how your mind races to create excuses, how your body agitates, wanting to please, how guilt tries to creep in. During these 2 minutes, don't fight anything, just observe. It is in this state of witness that you begin to reclaim your power. This protocol, seemingly simple, is a game changer because it puts you back in control. It shows you that you're not a slave to automatic reactions, that you can choose not to respond, not to beg, not to justify yourself. And each time you practice, you strengthen this new pattern. It's as if you're training an invisible muscle, the muscle of presence. The more you exercise it, the stronger it becomes, until at some point it becomes natural. Silence ceases to be discomfort and becomes rest. The lack of validation ceases to be pain and becomes freedom. I know it may seem challenging at first. After all, you've spent your life believing you had to fight to be seen. But this practice is exactly what will show you that you don't need to chase anything. Because true love isn't born from begging, it blossoms in authenticity. When you allow yourself not to ask, when you maintain your peace in the face of anxiety, you send the universe a clear message, I am enough. And it's this vibration that begins to attract different relationships, more conscious connections, people who respect you for who you are, not for how much you sacrifice. It's important to remember that this exercise isn't about creating a cold distance, but about reclaiming your center. When you choose your peace, you don't disappear, you appear. You become whole, and it's this wholeness that commands respect. Perhaps over the course of these 24 hours, you'll realize who truly values your presence and who was only accustomed to your infinite availability. And this realization is a gift, even if it hurts, because it frees you from illusions and clearly shows who deserves to be by your side. So now I want you to commit to this challenge. For 24 hours, don't ask for validation. Don't beg for love. Don't try to explain yourself to be accepted. Take a deep breath and declare, I choose my peace. And when you feel the urge to react, remember the second practice. Sit for 2 minutes in silence and observe. What you discover in this exercise can be more transformative than years of begging. Now, I want you to write this exact phrase in the comments. I choose my peace. That's because when you write, you not only reaffirm this commitment to yourself, but you also inspire others to do the same. This simple declaration is the first step in breaking a pattern that has plagued you for so long. Stopping begging doesn't mean closing your heart. This is one of the greatest fears of those beginning to free themselves from emotional dependence, believing that by stopping begging for love, they will become cold, insensitive, or incapable of connecting. But this isn't true. On the contrary, when you stop begging, you make room for real love, a love born of respect, presence, and truth. Osho said something profound. Compassion without awareness is attachment. Awareness without compassion is hardness. The path is in the center. This teaching reveals that balance isn't found in extremes, but in learning to unite heart and clarity. Throughout your life, you may have confused compassion with self-abandonment. You believed that loving meant sacrificing yourself, that caring for another meant self-denial, that being available was proof of affection. But that's not compassion. It's attachment. Attachment disguised as virtue, an attachment that creates dependence in both you and the other. It's when you give yourself without awareness, trying to save, rescue, or fix others, that suffering arises. Because what you call love is actually a fear of loss. It's a fear of silence, a fear of absence, a fear of not being enough. On the other hand, when someone discovers the importance of awareness, there's a risk of falling into the opposite extreme, hardening. People who have been deeply hurt learn to close themselves off, to build walls, to protect themselves so rigidly that they end up distancing themselves from life. Awareness turns to coldness, and compassion is lost. This is why Osho said that the true path lies in the center. The center is the place where you can love without losing yourself, can surrender without begging, can be present without nullifying yourself. This balance is what transforms the way you relate. When you stop begging, what disappears is not love, but attachment. Real love remains, only now it's born from a more mature, more conscious space. You don't love to be accepted. You love because you're already whole. You don't give yourself expecting crumbs in return. You share because you overflow. This shift is so powerful that it also changes the energy around you. People who previously approached you only to suck you dry realize they can't anymore. People who never knew how to respect your boundaries will say you've changed and try to blame you for it. But the truth is, you haven't become cold, you've become whole. And in this process, a new form of compassion emerges. A compassion that isn't blindness, but clarity. You can look at someone and perceive their pain without having to carry it on your shoulders. You can offer presence without drowning in the other person's drama. You can say no without needing to justify it, because you understand that your limits also teach the other person about respect. This is true compassion, the kind that comes from a conscious heart, not a begging heart. The balance between compassion and awareness also gives you something you may never have experienced: emotional freedom. Because when you beg for love, every gesture from the other becomes a trigger. If they respond, you feel loved. If they don't, you feel rejected. You become hostage to their behavior. But when you find your center, you discover that their silence doesn't define your worth, that their absence doesn't dim your light, that their rejection doesn't erase your presence. It's at this point that you finally begin to experience love without dependence, love without begging. And that doesn't mean you'll never feel pain again. It just means the pain no longer controls you. You can feel absence without begging. You can feel distance without despair. You can feel silence without needing to fill it with justifications. This is the difference between living in attachment and living in center. Osho said that awareness without compassion becomes hardness, but when you learn to unite the two, a new quality of love is born. A love that doesn't imprison, doesn't beg, doesn't get lost. A love that liberates. And perhaps this is the most important point. When you find this balance, you don't lose your sensitivity. You deepen it. You continue to be someone who feels, who connects, who loves. But now you feel without hurting yourself. You connect without being annulled, and you love without begging. This is the silent revolution that begins within you and expands to all areas of your life. Now reflect. How many times have you confused compassion with attachment? How many times have you believed you were loving when in fact you were denying yourself? This reflection is essential to understanding whether you are living at the extreme of blind giving or at the extreme of cold hardness. Write just one sentence in the comments: I choose center, because this is the commitment to balance, to the union of compassion and awareness, which is the true path to a love that does not beg. When you stop begging for love, you don't disappear and you appear, rare, whole, respected. This is the silent transformation that begins to happen within you when you decide to free yourself from emotional dependence and choose your peace over the need for approval. And if you've made it this far with me to the end of this video, it's because this message truly resonated with you. That's why I want to invite you to take the next step on this journey. Now, I want to leave two important requests for those who stuck with me until the end. First, please leave a like, because that shows me that this message resonated and also helps it reach more people who need to hear it right now. And second, subscribe to the channel, because each video here is a piece of this spiritual puzzle we're putting together, and I want to walk side by side with you on this journey. The next video is already appearing on the screen. I'll wait for you there so we can continue together.